She's on the
money.
She's on the money.
Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of She's on the Money. You are joined by myself and Miss Tony Lodge to introduce this very special bonus episode. Tony, who did we get to sit down with this week and have a chat with?
So we got to sit down with the CEO of Ubank, which was really fancy for us, Philippa, who is an incredible woman, has gone through an amazing journey and is now a female CEO of a bank.
Of an actual bank, like one of the biggest banks in the country.
I can't get over the fact that we got to chat with her, and because we're in lockdown, we got to do it over Zoom, so we got to talk to her and see her, and it was just really incredible.
It was actually such an experience, and I'm very lucky that I have somewhat made friends with Philippa over the last few months. She's honestly one of the biggest champions of She's on the Money. She adores our community. It seems wild to me that the CEO of a bank actually listens to every single one of our episodes when they drop. So think about that next time you download a She's on the Money episode, about who else is listening, because I had no idea. And when I grabbed a coffee with Philippa last time, she's like, Victoria, I've listened to all your podcasts. And I was like, what? Why would you do that? Like, you're the CEO of a bank. Like, you don't need my advice. Like, you're way smarter than me. So I was just so lucky to meet Philippa. And I knew when I met her that I really wanted to share her with our She's on the Money community, because I think that we all have, Tony, in our heads, this idea of what a bank CEO is like. And from my perspective as a young millennial, can I say that at 30? I don't know. But as a young millennial, I just have this preconceived idea in my head that they are male, they're older, they just are stuck in their ways, they're not progressive, they aren't the type of person that I would really resonate with. And Philippa is one of the most down-to-earth, relatable people that you will ever meet. In this interview with Philippa, she talks about her divorce and her money story and where she's come from, and that she doesn't come from a line of CEOs. And I just think she's so aspirational, and I don't want to keep pumping up her tires because I know she's going to listen to this one too. So Tony, let's jump straight into the interview. Let's dive straight in, Philippa. How did you become the CEO of Ubank?
Thanks, Victoria. So my journey towards being CEO of Ubank it's been a really interesting one, lots of twists and turns. I certainly, 20 years or so ago, when I started out full-time working after university, I didn't have my sights set on being CEO of anything. I was just happy to, be part of a team who was doing interesting work. And the story of my career has been pretty much taking every opportunity that's been thrown at me, taking on jobs that other people didn't want to do because they were hard or high risk, and showing enough resilience and determination to be able to do the hard jobs, so that at the end of each difficult job, I was always thrown another difficult job. And by the time you've sort of done 8 or 9 difficult jobs back to back, you're reasonably ready to run something like Ubank.
That is so awesome. But I think the most important thing for me, having met you and gotten the opportunity to sit down and have a coffee and ask you a whole heap of really pervy questions, I learned that it wasn't necessarily your experience, it was also your passion and the fact that you are literally so excited about finance and financial literacy. And, I find the banking space really interesting because it drives so much change, and there's just so much going on from, banking stuff, but to compliance and having gone through the Royal Commissions. Like, it's crazy to see the outcomes of that. But can you tell us a little bit about what you're passionate about? Because I know that is something that's going to really, really resonate with the people listening to this podcast right now.
Your point is correct that when I started, it probably wasn't the logical choice for me. So when you look back at my family of origin and my cousins and aunties and uncles, my family far and wide all work in the caring profession. So they are nurses or teachers or hairdressers or electricians, people who do something that's really valuable to other people. And banking is a little bit abstract to a lot of people. It sounds complicated, it sounds difficult, and it doesn't sound like it's part of the everyday life of each Australian. But when I started in banking, what I really quickly realised is that money is at the heart of people's welfare. It's at the heart of their health. It's at the heart of their safety and stability. And so for me, the reason that I started in banking is different to the reason I've stayed in banking. And the reason that I've stayed in banking for 15 years now and probably will for a good time to come is because I think if you can help people get into a position where they really understand their finances and when they're really making deliberate choices about their money, you can help people get into a much better position in their life. And so, taking care of people's money is not so different from taking care of people's health, taking care of people's children, etc. I see it all as part of social stability and giving back.
I love that. Okay, Philippa, Tony and I, we have this idea in our head of what a CEO, quote, should be, especially a bank CEO. They're usually white and male. They're usually in their late 60s or 70s because, stereotyping. Is that you? Have you come from lots of intergenerational wealth? Have you come from a line of CEOs? Is this just like, did your mum do this? So that's why you also wanted to be CEO? Where did you get your start? Can we know a little bit of the pervy details behind your background?
Sure. Well, I'm not male. I am in my early 40s. I don't come from I don't come from a long lineage of, CEOs or my dad ran a post office. My mum is a nurse. My wonderful brother is an electrician. And really the way that I first got my glimpse into corporate life and into the business world was that when I was a teenager, I babysat for a family in the area, and the father, Stephen, was a businessman and his wife was an accountant, Gillian. And they really took me in under their wing and they exposed me to the world of business and helped me see the possibilities for what my career could be. And I was very grateful. I ended up babysitting for them and then working in their business, and it really gave me a glimpse into a world which I hadn't seen. Now, my parents gave me a love for education and for making sure that I was bettering myself, but really it was through the lens of these two people that I babysat for that it really opened up that whole new world to me. So I guess
I'm special.
I guess where I have got to is a product of good opportunities, but grit, determination, and making the most of the opportunities that were put in front of me.
I love that. So, Philippa, what was your first job? Like, what were you doing?
My first job was in the local pharmacy. It was in my suburb, and I loved the job. I probably shouldn't say this, but when you work in a suburban pharmacy, you know everything that's going on in the pharmacy.
Oh, I love the pervy details. I feel like that would be the next level of pervy details.
Exactly. So I knew everything that was going on, but I always worked hard. When I was going through university, I had 2 jobs all the way through university. I've always had this sense that I needed to be taking care of myself and putting money away for savings, etc. I don't know why I had it inbuilt, but I always had the sense that I had to financially take care of myself.
And I feel like that oozes out of you as well. Like all your tips, all your tricks are always about, putting yourself forward and leaning into making sure that you're putting your financial security first. And I think that that's something that a lot of people in our community really struggle with because we get DMs. It's not always about what is happening in the community, as in publicly on the Facebook group or on our Instagram. A lot of the magic that happens in She's on the Money is in our Instagram messages or our Facebook messages or even my emails. And it's often young mums reaching out saying, I'm just breaking up with a partner or I'm going through a divorce, and they don't know what the right thing to do is. And I mean, it's very different for everybody's situation. But I think coming from somebody like you, the permission to lean into financial security when maybe everything inside of you is saying, no, you need to be there for your child, I think that is really, really special. And I think it's something that we should shout from the rooftops as well, because yes, they might be in childcare more hours than you would love them to be, but long term they are going to be so much better off because you made those decisions. And children know that. They can feel the stress, they can feel your anxiety. And I think that what you preach and what you talk about is just so important, and also just so relatable, and knowing where you sit and what you do, it's just going to permeate all the way through your organization.
When you work in a bank, one of the glimpses that you get is a glimpse into people's lives when things have gone wrong. And for a number of years, I ran the hardship function of a large bank, and that's where people call all day, every day, to tell you what's really going on in their life, not what Instagram says is going on in their life, but what's really going on. And, the proportion of customers who call in who are women, who are in difficult situations, when you see that, it's pretty sobering. And that's why I'm so passionate about women talking to women about finance, as well as talking to each other about, all the other aspects of life that we share very openly. One of the wonderful things about women is that we have a way of letting down our guard and telling each other really intimate details about our life, things that men typically don't share with one another. But when it comes to finances, the guards go up and we don't talk about that. So we're happy to talk about birth control, but we're not happy to talk about our financial position and needing a bit of help. So that's why I think that your book and the work that you're doing through your podcast and other areas is so important, because it allows women to actually ask the tough questions about what's really going on in our lives.
I think that's really, really important as well. And it seems so counterintuitive that in 2021, we still have people in our community that say speaking about your income is taboo. And I've recently learnt, even though I'm an employer and I, have a team of people, I've recently learnt it is still the norm to have caveats in people's employment contracts to say, do not speak about your income with other people, because I started talking about it and, saying this should be more normalized. And people like Victoria, I signed a contract last week and it said that. And I just go, are we really that backwards? And I get bombarded, literally bombarded online through social media with people telling me that what I'm doing is lower class and that you shouldn't be talking about your income because it's not classy, and that I got called a feral the other day, and I was like, do you know what? You can say whatever you want, but I know deep down that people are in better financial positions because other people are willing to talk about it. And if it's in your employment contract to not talk about income, that's okay, but knowing that the conversations are going on in the peripheral, knowing that they're going on at brunch now, and that we've got the She's on the Money podcast and now the Property Playbook to really normalize, one, hey, this is the property journey. This is what it's going to take. I'm really sorry that, we're not here to turbocharge it. We're not actually even here to go, hey, here's actually how to buy a property. You can have it next year. We're here to say, hey, it can take 10 years. But if that's what you really want, we're here for that long haul. We are here to help you. Here's how you should be doing it. This is the type of bank you should be with so that you can actually make the most of your savings and all of that fun stuff. But it just honestly baffles me that in 2021, we are still not having open, honest conversations around money and empowering women in the way that they genuinely deserve to be empowered. What do you think, Philippa, is the next step towards actually creating financial equality?
Look, the data around this is really sobering. There are, International Women's Day, you always see the data that comes out around income equality, around representation of women in corporate and on boards, etc. And some of the stats say it's going to take 50 years, some of the stats say it's going to take 200 years, depending on which stats you're looking at. What we can do today, I think, as women is firstly to lean in to our careers as much as we can, and everyone's different, and there's always stages in your life where you're you have the time and capacity to be more focused on work, or where you need to focus on other things. So there's seasons to life, but not giving up too soon on your career. Taking care of your personal finances really matters, and then helping one another, and women helping women is such a recipe for success, because we've got we've got thousands of years of women banding together to help one another out, and this podcast is it's part of that.
I love that, and I knew that you were going to say that in a way, but I think it's so important because at the end of the day, the values that you hold are actually the values that the She's on the Money team hold really close to their hearts. So I guess pivoting into the conversation around COVID-19, we have been going through this for a significant period of time now, and we're seeing in our community that that's significantly impacting, one, our ability to get into property, but two, to just save and invest and have healthy finances, and a lot of people are experiencing really dwindling emergency funds. Can you give us some insight as to what you and UBank are seeing when it comes to our health goals and our finance goals and how COVID has impacted that?
So UBank's done some really interesting work, research work in probably the last 18 months or so, and we've looked at savings patterns for younger people, and it is really clear that there are a lot of people are struggling, with underemployment or unemployment and the uncertainty of things. But it's also really clear that there's been a real shift in focus for people who are trying to save, and, the focus being more on rainy day accounts, on having a safety net underneath, having an emergency fund rather than saving for specific discretionary goods or holidays, etc. And I think that's a positive. And so there's always an upside, right? And I think that part of the conversation in Australia and globally now is making sure that we plan. We hope for the best, but we plan for the worst. And I think with financial management, that's so much a part of what you're trying to do, which is you're trying to lay down healthy habits that are going to help you achieve your goals, but also make sure that you can manage if things don't go quite to plan. So I think that one of the things that COVID has done has helped us think about a shorter span of time. So, previously, when you're saving for a goal that's 10 years away, it's really difficult to keep on a savings path for 10 years. And I think that what helpfully COVID has shown us is that we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time, in 9 months' time. So all we can do is lay down, patterns today, tomorrow, next week that are taking us in the right direction. Often when we look into the savings patterns of UBank customers, we see that people are setting themselves 3-month goals. So they're saving a certain amount. They're trying to hit a $1,000 savings goal. And once they've got the $1,000 savings goal, they're trying to hit a $3,000 savings goal. And when you break things down in those kind of steps, it's a lot easier for people. The challenge with saving for a house or an investment property deposit is it's a big number, but if you can break it down in smaller steps, it helps keep you motivated along the way.
I would agree, and we see a lot of that in our community. Like, saving for a home is such a big undertaking, and it's actually really overwhelming when you start speaking about it openly. You go, all right, Philippa, I would really like to save for my first home. And you go, great, how much of a deposit do you want? And you kind of start looking into it, and you go, $100,000. And you go, okay, cool. Like, that seems pretty normal for metropolitan Melbourne. We're not saying that that's normal regionally, but you go, okay, that seems about fair. How much stamp duty am I paying? And you've got to add all those things up. And then we start breaking down that cost based on how much capacity we actually do have to save. And I find it really interesting because there's a lot of research at the moment in Australia done by the ABS saying that it takes on average a millennial 4 years to save for a house. And I would absolutely argue with that because looking at my community, to save $100,000 plus stamp duty, especially as a single female, it's going to take close to 10 years. And I think we really need to start normalizing those timeframes as much as they are overwhelming, as much as, we're setting smaller 3, 6, 9 month goals like you were talking about. We really need to normalize that, yep, those are little goals to set along the way, but the bigger picture, unfortunately, is quite a large one. And that's a really big pill to swallow. And you've got to really make sure that that goal that you're working towards is one that you are super passionate about. Because if you're just saving for a house because you think it's the right thing to do, that's such a big piece of your life that you are contributing to something that if it's not your favorite thing or it's not something you genuinely want, maybe we really need to, pivot and reposition ourselves to make sure that we are actually creating the life we want. Because otherwise, I can't see myself committing to a goal for 10 years that I ultimately didn't want to achieve. And I'm in a very privileged position where I have a dual income household. My partner has a salary and wage earning job, which is epic as somebody who, like me, earns their own income being self-employed, and that goes up and down depending on the month. So for us, it was much easier to save for a home. But that journey still took more than 5 years between the two of us. And I just look at it and go, even I didn't fit into the millennial bracket of what was expected to save for a home. And I think it just seems like such unnecessary pressure, especially if in Melbourne it's going to take $100,000. Like Tony, you and I were talking about this recently, where, you know, you're thinking about one day purchasing property and $100,000 seems to be about what you'd need to save. 4 years, that's $25,000 a year. Do you have that savings capacity?
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And I think that we really need to normalize that that's so much. But back to what you were saying before, Philippa, let's make smaller goals. Let's make those 3-month ones so that we can stay on track. Let's do 3, 6, 9 months so that we can stay motivated in the long term instead of falling off the horse really, really early on.
It's easy to think that you have to get somewhere in one step as well. When I was in my, 20s, my first property that I purchased was a house right up in the top of northern Queensland, because that's where I could afford to buy a house. And the, wisdom that had been passed down to me was that it was better to buy land than to buy an apartment. So as a result, I went to remote northern Queensland, I bought a house. I sold that house about 5 years later and made about a 10% loss on it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because I'd bought in a market that I didn't understand. And so you make mistakes along the way, but you also learn something from them. And, once I got myself out of that situation, I bought an apartment in Sydney. And I got to buying a family home for myself in my late 30s, post-divorce. And I can tell you, late 30s, post-divorce, when you're taking on a big mortgage all by yourself with 2 little kids, that's just as scary as taking on debt in your 20s, when you have no responsibilities and you have expenses in your life that you can flex up and down. So the thing that I think about property is property will always feel like a big step. No matter where you are in your journey, you sort of take a deep breath. You do all the thinking you possibly can, you run all the numbers, and then you step out into it. But one of the things that I think is really important with property is that you're thinking really hard about the impact that property is going to have on your lifestyle. And just as you've said, Victoria, buying a property that you can't afford so that you have the feeling that you've got greater safety and security is not necessarily a step forward. And when you look at all of the hype around property prices, sure, we are in a market that is very buoyant at the moment, but we've also got a whole lot of extra dynamics that go into making you feel like you should be panicked about property. So, you've got clickbait, news articles, you've got, most of us have feeds set up so that you're inundated with all these properties that hit your email or your phone, even when you're not even thinking about it. And I think that the important thing when you're looking at getting into property investment is that you just think about what you can really afford, and you set parameters around that, and you don't go chasing things that are going to put you in a position where you feel more vulnerable, and you just don't panic as well, because even though you think you have, there's a lack of supply at the moment and I have to find something, in reality, there are tens of thousands of houses every year traded across Australia, so we shouldn't feel in a mad panic just right now.
I think that's a really good point, and that's something that I really admire about you, is how openly you speak about your own journey, because I feel like that is so relatable, especially to our community. Like you mentioned it before, like you've gone through a divorce, you had 2 small kids, you managed to buy a house on your own, which is no mean feat. It doesn't matter what type of income you have. At the end of the day, being a sole income household, purchasing a home is really hard. If you could go back to just before you did that, do you have any tips and tricks that you wish you had?
I think the thing that I'm most pleased about with my personal journey. And it's important to your listener base, I think, because you've got such a strong female listener base, is that you hear a lot of advice when you have kids about how having children and pursuing your career are at odds with one another. And I certainly, when I had young kids, I spent a lot of time thinking about the impact of being a full-time working mum on my two little boys, and I really grappled with what was the right balance, etc. But I can tell you, when I was in the situation of being the sole sort of source of stability for those kids, I was so pleased that at so many times where I could have wound back from my career, I actually lent in, and I lent into being in a position of having a good job, good career prospects, etc. Because then when the time came, I was able to provide for my kids and provide for myself as well. So one of the things I'd say to your community is, for the mums out there that are struggling with the questions about, should I feel guilty about pursuing my career, or does financial stability matter versus being there at every single moment of every single day with the kids, I openly encourage all the women that I work with to make sure that they're putting their financial stability really at the heart of what they're doing, because your kids are better off if you have financial stability, and you can make better choices if you've got options. And so while that doesn't directly answer your question about what it felt like or what my tips were for myself, I think that my number one tip for the women in your community is to stay the course with believing that financial stability matters. And also, just money sounds complex, finance sounds complex. And there is also a whole industry around making it sound complex so that people feel that they can't do things without, lots and lots of advice around them. But there's lots of ways to educate yourself. Victoria, your book is fantastic. I bought it for a whole bunch of people, and we've sent it out to all the staff.
You really did. You really did. I was the one who fulfilled that and signed the books, and there was a lot of them, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Philippa, when are you writing your book? Because I want a book on your journey. I want all your tips and tricks. I want to be told to lean in when we feel like we shouldn't be. I want all of this wrapped up with a really beautiful cover. Got a publisher. Can you introduce you?
Look, I think that when I look at the people that I've learned from in my career, they are people who make mistakes and they get it wrong, but they're willing to share that. And, there's so many people who are successful in life, and, they lay out the playbook of, I did this amazing thing, then I did that amazing thing, and the following year I did another amazing thing. And that's not how life pans out. Life pans out usually with trying some stuff, stumbling a bit, picking yourself up, trying something else, succeeding there. Then the next thing you try, you get knocked down. And there is a lot to be said for just getting up, dusting yourself off and keeping on going. And I think it's the same with personal finances, that, you set yourself a 3-month goal, and 8 times out of 10, you don't achieve that goal because for some reason something happens, you fall off the wagon, you accidentally buy that, thing that you shouldn't have bought. But at least
we've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there, right? I've all been there. But at least if you set yourself a goal and you work towards it, even if you only get 80% of the way there, you're better off than if you'd never set the goal at all. And that's why I like what you guys do, which is, you encourage people to make a plan, do their best to stick to the plan, and if they don't stick to it, it doesn't matter. Just get up and keep going.
I like that. And I think that that's one of the things that I really admire about people, and it's the thing that I've noticed I'm really drawn towards when looking at, people that I aspire to be like, or people that I look towards who have really good leadership skills. It's not that they're perfect, it's that they usually have a really, really good level of grit. They're willing to get up when things are hard. They're willing to try and try and try again. It's not because they're the most intelligent people in the world. It's not because they're the prettiest or the smartest or literally anything est. It's always because they're the grittiest. And I feel like that's one of the things that we can all learn from, and we can all take into our own personal lives when it comes to saving or investing, or even just getting it together when it comes to having too many bank accounts, or working out what's going on with your super and rolling it all together. It just takes grit. You don't have to be intelligent or, the smartest or the funniest. You actually just have to go, all right, I'm just going to make this work. I'm going to look up how to do it. I'm going to educate myself. I'm going to do it again. And I find it really inspiring knowing where you've come from and what you've gone through to then find out you're the CEO of a bank, like one of the bigger banks in Australia. Like, that's crazy to me to think that your tenacity has taken you this far. Where to next, Philippa? What are you doing next? What is UBank doing next? How can we all be a part of this journey?
UBank's on a pretty exciting path at the moment. We have just been part of the purchase of one of the really new banks that's been launched in Australia. That's a bank called 86400, which is a name that's a little bit hard to remember, but it stands for the number of
She's on the money knows, because we worked with them in our very second season of the podcast, 86400, because that's how many seconds are in a day, right?
That's exactly right. So UBank is merging with 86400, which means that we will move on to incredible new technology that the team has built. And there's a really great team on both sides that are coming together. The thing that makes UBank and 86400 really compatible is that both teams and both organisations are passionate about bringing incredible value to customers, so that customers are getting absolute bang for their buck through their banking and through their home loans as well. So we're on a good journey. It's pretty exciting at the moment, and there's plenty of your listener base who bank with us, and hoping to be able to throw open the door to more in the future.
I hope so, because I feel like it's really aligned to our values and our purpose and exactly what we want to do. And I know that it makes me feel more motivated just knowing, even in the background, that the people I'm working with or, engage with are on my team and are working towards similar goals. And, they've bought a family home, so they've been through that, so they know what that's like, and they know what, facilities I might need in the future with my mortgage. I just think it's so smart, and UBank are literally so lucky to have you. I know we keep talking, and I'm so grateful to have been able to have this opportunity to have a chat with you, but I would love to know, as the CEO of a bank, what are your top 3 finance tips?
Top 3 finance tips from me, as much from my personal life as being CEO of the bank, because I tend to find that what works for myself is a decent start. So tip number 1, I would say don't be intimidated by finances. So it's money. That's all it is. There shouldn't be anything intimidating. There's plenty of books you can read. Your one is the best place to start, Victoria. But don't let anyone make you feel like you're not smart enough to take control of your money. Mm-hmm. And the thing linked to that as well is, particularly as you've got a big female listener base, stay in control of your money. So it's really important that you're thinking really hard about what you manage yourself. If you're in a partnership, be really thoughtful about making sure that you continue to be in the driver's seat of your own money, so that you can make sure that you are always well placed to take care of yourself if the need arises. Next tip would be, it's about lifestyle creep. So if you are hanging out with people who are in a very different financial position to yourself, you can very easily find that in an effort to keep up with the people around you, you're actually depleting your savings and you're not getting ahead because you're going out to dinner. Well, not at the moment because we're in COVID, but you're spending money you don't have.
We used to know that. And maybe soon, I don't know how it's going in New South Wales, but here in Victoria, we've been told that this is the last lockdown we'll ever go through, which means we'll probably have a lot more dinners in our future. So still very relevant commentary.
Exactly. So lifestyle creep. Be thoughtful about, the costs that you have in your life. Are you living in a place that actually it's a nice place, but it's pushing you to the limits of what you can afford? Are you hanging out with people who actually have a really different income to you, and so you're finding that they're able to save, but you aren't because of the lifestyle, keeping up with the Joneses? So that's the second thing. And the third thing is really about automating. So, put your savings plan on automation. If you get a pay rise, don't let your costs and your expenses just creep up with the pay rise. So try to lock yourself in to a certain amount of spending and hold it for a couple of years, because in a couple of years we all tend to get a little bit of pay rise or a little bit of extra money in, and if you can not inflate your lifestyle, that puts you in a good position.
You're in the perfect position to have such impactful change, and the fact that you are in the driver's seat of such a large bank, like watching it from the sidelines, knowing that you guys have just acquired 86,400, like we are so excited to watch the future of you guys and what you create. And I have no doubt 10 years from now, we'll just be talking about all of the good work that Philippa did.
Well, look, I've been following. I think, Victoria, I reached out to you a number of months back. I really admire what you're doing. I think that there is such an important space for women, helping other women in all aspects of life, but particularly around financial empowerment. Mm-hmm. For many, many reasons, women are always better off if they have financial stability. Their children are better off, their communities are better off, their aging parents are better off. The more that we can do to help women take control of their money and their financial future, the better things go. So what you're doing is wonderful. I'm glad to be a part of it, and I think you guys are great.
Tony, that was an epic interview. I loved every second of that, and I feel like our community is going to absorb it and love it as well, and hopefully love her just a little bit more, because who doesn't love a female in a leadership position where she can actually make tangible change? Like, is that not cool?
It's our favourite thing to see. And Eubank have actually been so generous with their time. We've interviewed them before over on the Property Playbook. So if you want to hear Eubank chat to us about, mortgage myth busting, you're going to absolutely love it. And that's over on the Property Playbook feed. I assume that everybody that's listening to this also subscribes to that, but we just pop that in just to make sure.
Yeah, like it's not just She's on the Money. We actually have 2 other podcasts, which so many people are like, oh, hey, I saw a post in She's on the Money the other day that was like, hey, any small business owners here as well, and She's on the Money. I was like, hey, did you know we have an entire community for you guys? Anyway, I think that would be really fun if you are looking to turbocharge your savings or learn more about the property journey. The Property Playbook is absolutely built for you, my friends. So hop on over there and check it out. But as always, that is all we have time for today. So just before we head off, we'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. They're the traditional custodians of the lands, the waterways and the skies all across Australia. We thank you for sharing and for caring for the land on which we are able to learn. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and we share our friendship and our kindness.
The advice shared on She's on the Money is generally nature and does not consider your individual circumstances. She's on the Money exists purely for educational purposes and should not be relied upon to make an investment or any financial decision. And we promise that Miss Victoria Devine is an authorised representative of... That's you. And did you know that you're an authorised representative of Australia Pacific Funds Management Proprietary Limited, ABN 341324632257, AFSL 339151?
I actually knew that, and I know all those numbers because whenever we do advice, I have to write those numbers on everything. They're like kind of like my phone number, so I know them back to front all the way around. Like that's why sometimes at the end of pods, I just butt in and say, "Hey Tony, I know this too," just to like flex.
Just to flex, yeah,
just
and that's fair enough.
That's all I've got. Finance is cool, guys.
We hope you love this bonus episode, but we'll catch you Monday.
See you later, friends.
Bye.